So this is a tough one because not only is it a scripture that everybody knows and one that everybody's heard many times, but the Reverend John Shima did 3 on this and beautifully through his own story. So, man, I'm going to have to pick up my game. But seriously though, when you come to a text like this, you can't come to it the same way every time. I mean, what is this story about? Is it about a son who runs off and does a bunch of dumb things and then comes back repentant? Or is it about a son who runs off and isn't repentant because he just says, you know what? It's better if I go back home, so I'll concoct a story that makes it look like I'm really sorry, and I'll go tell my dad I'm sorry and everything will be fine. Or is it about a forgiving father who accepts his son who did all these silly things? Or is it about the indignant, self-righteous older brother who won't accept that his younger brother was accepted back in and loved? It's hard to tell. But before this, there were all these parables, right? There was the parable of the lost coin. There was the parable of the lost sheep. And we call this story the story of the prodigal son. But really, these 3 parables are about being lost and being found again. The story starts off, there was a man who had 2 sons. It doesn't say there was a son who had a brother and a father. The story's about the father. But if it's about the son, then it's just like the coin or the sheep of being lost and being found again. But yet, we can't leave out that older brother, because it is not easy being the oldest sibling. Robert Brown Taylor, the Episcopal priest, was telling about a story of, she was 9 years old, oldest sibling. She had a 7-year-old and 3-year-old sisters. And she's home one day and she was tasked with taking care of the younger siblings. And her mom comes up to her, grabs her by the arm, and starts marching her up the stairs, and she knew she was in trouble, but she had no idea for what. She gets upstairs, and there, sitting on the floor with a black crayon, is her 3-year-old sister coloring the foot of the porcelain tub in black. Now, Robert Brown Taylor didn't do that. The sister did it. But the mom said, I put you in charge of taking care of her. So this is on you. And so she got spanked for it. Now, in my life, it was a bit different. I was more of an instigator than that. My younger brother, Trent, always seemed to get the limelight and all the caring and always couldn't seem to do anything wrong. So I, at times had to take matters into my own hands. Like one time when I took my mom's lipstick and wrote his name on the wall in his handwriting, and then went and told Mom, he did this. Oh, he got a whooping. It was about time. I try not to do things like that anymore. Or the time when we were at a babysitter, and I don't know, I was probably 8, maybe 7, he was 5 or 4, and I tell you, it was a cute babysitter, so, as a kid you're trying to impress her and whatever, and I'm jumping off the couches and acting like I'm Superman and all this, and I kept getting told that I was so wrong. She locked me in the closet once, I think, and it was just, wasn't good at all, but I remember feeling so bad that he was just coddled over, and here I was just being thrown in the garbage because I was the older son, the older sibling. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. Prodigals. Extravagant living. That's what a prodigal means, and that's not what the story's about. The story is about being lost. But the question is it so obvious who was lost in the story? Certainly we think it was the younger brother who went away and was lost and was dead, but then came back alive and found and all of that hunky-dory stuff. But just like with all these parables, it's never really that easy. And that brings us to Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers was a contemporary of Maslow, and so he was focused in on this positive psychology, right? The idea that why do we have to focus on people's so-called problems? Why do we have to be in there trying to fix things? So he developed a person-centered type therapy where the counselor became more of a friend of the patient or of the client and would talk to them and get to know them, really get to know their who-ness, as he called it. Who is this person really, and what are they feeling? And in doing so, instead of taking this top-down approach saying, I'm the expert and you're the sick person who needs to listen to me to get well, he stood alongside them, and discovered many things. He discovered that human beings develop their sense of self based on their perceptions of the world. The way we perceive things is how we create our value system, which becomes the lens through which we do right or wrong, whether it's for us or for somebody else. And he said, a well person will not experience what's called incongruence, which is to say that we have a real self. The real self that, if unimpeded, would arise to be the real, true, natural self that we are supposed to be. But he says, for some reason, we feel so inclined to create what's called an ideal self, the way we think we should be, whether it's for somebody else's sake to impress them, or maybe for our own sake so that we can feel good enough about ourselves. And so we develop this ideal self, and every time we fall short of that ideal that we create for ourselves, as false and unattainable as it is, we experience suffering, what he calls incongruence. And he says that human beings, and I gotta look up the word, subception, so a fully functioning person will not commit, so to speak, what he calls subception. And subception is the idea that we put up these defense mechanisms to block any sensory perceptions that are uncomfortable to us. For example, an older brother who refuses to go to a party because he cannot mentally, psychologically, emotionally take going to a party to celebrate a younger brother who has obviously defied his father and done things that he should not have done, period. Right? Black and white. And I, as the older brother, cannot accept this, therefore I'm not going. So I'm going to commit subception. And I'm going to go to my father and tell him that he is wrong for accepting this son of his who has defied him so. And the father says, you have always been with me. All that is mine is yours. Now, he wasn't just saying that out of the goodness of his heart. He wasn't just saying, son, I'll give you everything, relax. No, he was telling the truth, because that son of his, as the younger son, only gets 30%. The older son gets 70%. Well, the younger son already cashed out his share. He's done. The remaining 70% that's left, it all belongs to the older son. Once dad's gone, it's all his. So he's saying, if you are looking for justice, you've already received it. You're getting all of this. I've always been here with you. But to that son, the older son, it wasn't enough. Yeah, but I've been here with you all the time, working like a slave for you. I've never complained. I get up when I'm supposed to. I slop the pigs and feed the sheep and whatever, all the stuff that I'm supposed to do. And you never act like you appreciate me. You never even gave me a goat to party with my friends. But when this kid comes back, this son of yours, this fool, you kill the best, meatiest, most tender, luscious, juicy hunk of meat that you could find, and you throw this big lavish party. And what's more, you put a robe on him, showing ownership within the family. You put the ring on him. You cover his feet with sandals. What's wrong with you, old man? Have you lost it? Have you become soft in your old age? When we listen to this story, when we realize that it's about being lost and being found, we find that it's not always obvious who was lost and who was found. Because yes, where we know that the younger son had gone away and finally supposedly come to his senses, and many people say, no, he didn't come to his senses. He concocted this story to go back and act like he was sorry to his dad, so the dad would accept him. Because it was better living at home, even with the shame of the neighbors saying, like, you're the kid who made his dad sell part of his property before he died, put a slap in the face. But he figured that was better than wallowing with the pigs and realizing that the servants were at least getting bread and drink, where he had to suffer there. You see, the father was lost too. We can blame him for being too soft on the kid, whether it was when he came back or even before he left. We can say, you know what, you coddle a kid and this is what's going to happen. Right? You made him a spoiled brat, and so he goes to your face, basically saying, oh man, I wish you were dead. Because that's what it means to say, I want you to sell my share of the property and give me the money. No less than going to his father and saying, old man, I wish you were dead. And he did it. He didn't go upside his head. He didn't say, don't you dare disrespect me like that. He said, okay, is that what you want? You got it. So in a way, the father was lost too, but we don't really know how. Was it because he was too lenient or because he was too weak? The older brother, he was lost. He remains lost at the end of the story. We don't know what happens to him. Does he soften up? Does he lighten his heart? Do things get better? Does he finally take it upon himself to say, okay, I accept this? We don't know what happens to him. But we do know that sometimes it is the perceiver who is lost and not the one who has gone away. Anytime we pinhole ourselves into these roles that we create, anytime we create an identity for ourselves that's not true to who we are, and then we start developing these false values around them to say, that's wrong, that's unacceptable. Now, I'm not telling us that we should become relativists, that we should say anything is okay, of course not. Sometimes there is black and white, but there's always a lot of gray. And we have to be careful about the way we judge things. We have to be careful about the lens that we use, that we create ourselves to view the world and one another through. Just like the older brother looked through his own created lens at his younger brother. Because when we become mindful of one another and realize that we are creating truths that don't really exist, then we start to see one another differently. Then we stop judging one another. Then we stop saying, you are absolutely wrong and I am absolutely right. Because in this story, nobody was wrong, but everybody was right. How was that possible? The older brother was right. His younger brother did act like a punk. The father was right. You should accept that the fruit of your loin and embrace him when he comes home. The younger son was right. He realized he screwed up and went back. Everybody was right. But then, doesn't somebody have to be wrong? No. It doesn't make sense. Not a bit. But it's not supposed to. When we clear our vision, when we realize that sometimes we, the beholder, are the ones who are lost, and sometimes we find out that the person lost never went away in the first place. They were always there. And in this, we're all found. If you want to relax and listen to the next song, or